Most comic book movies end up sucking these days. It's back to life. But why the hell should a movie sucking affect the price of comic books? Let's discuss. Thanks for coming and watching another video. And again, like I alluded to in the intro, I want to have open this up as a discussion. So let's go over to the screen. Okay, so we're looking at Rotten Tomatoes, and we all know that Craven is the last movie that came out. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 16% flat, 74% on the popcorn meter. So there is a discrepancy there because, the ratings are from the audiences, and this is all taken with a grain of salt. I don't take any reviews as gospel because so many times people have just missed the mark completely. And that's one of the reasons why I want to discuss this. Craven. Critics, some of them said, one got a tomato, one got a splat. A tomato, splat, 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 tomato. Okay. How about Venom: The Last Dance? That was another new one that just came out that people were like, kind of dumping on. 41% on the tomato meter, 81% on the popcorn meter. Pretty big discrepancy there. So that means the people who are paid to, or I don't know if they just do it on their own, they review it and look at it from a technical standpoint, I would assume. And you have people that look at it and here as an audience view. Why would it matter to you as a comic book collector or us as comic book collectors if the movie sucked or not? Is this movie going to damage the perception of the comic book character Venom? Is Craven going to damage the comic book perception of Craven? Is the Last Hunt going to be diminished in any way because this movie sucked or didn't suck, depending on your view? Because I'll be honest, I haven't seen any of those two. I've seen Venom, and I do not like Tom Hardy as Venom. I do not like how the Venom is just, to me, it just looks kind of stupid overall, but also when the head comes out of the body and talks to him separately. I mean, I guess you can't really do the whole, talking inside the head type of thing on the screen. You have to have the head coming off. But I mean, let's look at Eternals. Eternals was viewed as, 47%. As a movie, I thought Eternals was really entertaining. I like the imagery, especially when they were dealing with Sprite and her illusions and everything. I thought at the end scene when Cersei puts her hands down to try to put Tiamat to sleep, I thought that was really, graphically and, just imaginatively done. I thought that was really cool. Those images were awesome. I've never read the Eternals books, so I don't know how that translates. Most people have to understand these movies are not really made 100% for fanboys and fangirls to be comic accurate. It's almost impossible. Let's face it. It's almost impossible. You want something like that? Come here. Come watch Spider-Man, the animated series. And that leads me into my next movie. And this is probably the one that most reflects the way that the comic book market reacts to these things. 11% tomato meter from Madam Web, 55% for fans. So fans weren't entertained and critics didn't understand it technically, I guess. But now let's go back to this. Does that take away from the way that Madam Web was portrayed in Spider-Man the Animated Series? Does it take away from how the character of Madam Web was drawn and and it comes across in the comic books themselves. That's what this is all dealing with. After the Madam Web movie, the books just tanked. What was it? Spider-Man? It was Spider-Man 209, and was the first appearance. Spider-Man 216 was the second appearance. What was it? The Julia Carpenter version in Spider-Woman #1, the 1989 series, that tanked. I mean, we look at these things and it's like, why do we let these? Well, let's refresh this page so we don't look at that stupid thing. But why do we let these movies dictate what happens with the comic books? It's something I liken to. Yeah, I know this isn't going to be a direct relation, but why can't I find the movie? I'm looking for Steel, one of the first comic book movies. Okay. 19% popcorn meter, 8% tomato meter. Did Shaquille O'Neal's basketball cards, did his autographs, did anything suffer after this movie came out? No, it didn't. And this is my point. Maybe because it was a different time, maybe because it's, it's not exactly apples to apples. Maybe it's, I don't even know what the comparison would be, because it's not apples to oranges, because you're still talking about a comic book movie, like a bad movie, being reflective on some other market. Because comic books and movies, they're not the same markets, even though one's based on the other. But still, Shaquille O'Neal, his comic books, because back then we were not doing any of the spec. So, Steel didn't bump or drop, the comic book series or anything with the character. It had no effect on this, because this was way before comic book speculation, the MCU, DCEU, any of that stuff. But my question is, if his basketball cards, his autographs, stuff that was related to this movie didn't get impacted by the crappiness of the movie, why are we letting comic book values drop based on something that doesn't have to do with the comic book or the character itself? This has to do with the writers, the producers, the directors, even the actors. I mean, we look at, like I said, if we look at Spider-Man, the animated series, we've got Venom, we've got Carnage, we've got all these. Here, we've got Rhino. Rhino, from what I've heard in the Kraven movie, sucks. It looked absolutely ridiculous in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 or whichever movie he was in, where it was the guy from, oh my God, I can't think of his name now. Crap. I can't think of his name. He was in the movie where he was blue, like the Cody Banks or something like that, or he was a bad guy and they turned him blue. And he's been in a lot of movies. I can't think of his name now. But besides the point. I mean, we've got all these characters in other films and other forms of media. Why are we letting one movie or two movies tank all that stuff? I mean, yeah, we go back. X-Men Apocalypse. 65% tomato meter, 65 popcorn meter, 47% tomato meter. The movie sucked. I'm just gonna say it. The movie sucked. To me, all these movies sucked. This whole X-Men First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, they all sucked. I'm not a fan of how they drew the teams up, how any of that stuff. I'm not a traditionalist by any means, but I did not like Jennifer Lawrence. I did not like how Apocalypse was portrayed. I definitely did not like Ben Hardy, whichever one that was, as Archangel. kind of wasn't into how Storm was portrayed. I didn't understand Angel Salvador in First Class, or at least Darwin had a relevance somewhat to the First Class. Now, this is going back to, getting a little bit off topic and getting back to comic books again, but at least Darwin was part of that in between the original X-Men class and the new X-Men, when X-Men Deadly Genesis rewrote history. That said, Darwin and Gabriel, no, not Vulcan. Yeah, Darwin and Vulcan and a couple of others were recruited to go with Cyclops to save the original X-Men from Krakoa, and then Professor X wiped their minds and nobody remembered it, and then all that stuff happened. But at least Darwin had some connection to that First Class. At least Banshee somewhat had a connection to it, because he was in the X-Men books at the same time as the First Class was, the First Class of the X-Men was being done. But to me, it made no sense, and I didn't really care for any of that stuff. Yeah, to me, it's just dumb. But it doesn't take away from what the X-Men, original X-Men, was in the comics are supposed to be. It doesn't take away from what the X-Men, the animated series, and X-Men 97 were. It doesn't take away from the Inner Circle of the Hellfire Club, because we saw. I'm sorry, but was it Sebastian Shaw that he played? Oh my God. I know that was supposed to be Emma Frost with her crystal form and everything like that. But Kevin Bacon, was that Sebastian Shaw, if I'm remembering correctly? January Jones is Emma Frost. And Kevin Bacon, where's Kevin Bacon? Yeah, Sebastian Shaw. Okay. So to me, the way that they portrayed them, completely idiotic, made no sense to me. But it doesn't change what we saw in the comic books, what we've seen in X-Men, the animated series. We had Azazel in the First Class. He didn't appear. When the hell did he appear? He was like in the 500 series of the X-Men. So if we look up Azazel, it's the Azazel. His first appearance was 400. Okay, so in 2003 was his first appearance. Yet we had Azazel in X-Men: The First Class. I mean, see, these things, it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's a cool character in the books. It doesn't take away from the storyline. Let's see, Days of Future Past. X-Men Days of Future Past. What did that get? Okay, so that got pretty good ratings. To me, it really didn't make sense. It didn't make sense to me how Kitty Pryde was the one sending Wolverine's mind back into the past. Kitty Pryde never had that power. It was her mind that went in. But here, it had nothing to do with the comic books. This was not comic accurate at all. And it got a 91% and a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, on the tomato meter. So it just goes to show you that people bitch and moan about these comic accurate movies, or non-comic accurate movies, but this one got a great ratings, even though completely different. I honestly don't understand what the problem is with the comic book community, why we had let something like that happen. Maybe you guys could tell me in the comments, like for you personally, how do you feel when a comic book is translated to the big screen. For instance, Endgame. We have Endgame and I know those got pretty good ratings. So Avengers Endgame got a 90 and a 94%. So to me, that also wasn't that great of a movie either. But to me, the best part was the end scene when everybody came back, and then they had the big fight, and Spider-Man was swinging through, and everybody was helping him get the gauntlet. But it's one of these things where we know from the beginning that a lot of these storylines cannot be told as being comic accurate because Marvel doesn't have those characters. Marvel doesn't have Silver Surfer. Marvel doesn't have. They didn't have Adam Warlock in at this time, and those were the two central figures in the Infinity Gauntlet. It literally was Silver Surfer crashing through Doctor Strange's roof and looking for Strange to tell him about Thanos, and it was literally Adam Warlock who devised the plan to get the Infinity Gauntlet. I mean, the way that they did what they could with the characters, but to me, it's like, okay, why is that okay? Why is this movie okay and didn't destroy the Infinity Gauntlet comic book series? Why are those books still, I mean, depending on where you look, we could see them probably for still $50. Infinity Gauntlet. Let's see. So on my comic shop, number one, A Very Fine is $29 direct. Number two, A Very Fine is $21. Why aren't these dollar bin books now? Because, I mean, if we just look at the cover, She-Hulk, not in there. This version of Thor, this is Eric Masterson. Is it Eric Masterson? Yeah, Kevin's the son, Eric is the father. So yeah, Eric Masterson, not the right version of Thor. We didn't have any of the cosmic entities helping out. Hercules, Iceman, is it Guardian at this point for Heather McDonald? The Fantastic Four aren't there. Daredevil's not there. I mean, if you want to say that the Eternals movie should crash the Eternals comic books, why aren't we saying that the Infinity Gauntlet books should be crashed? How about Thanos Quest? That's the prelude to this. Thanos Quest. Number one in A Very Fine is still $23. I would imagine it hasn't been, much more than that. I mean, CGC books, 9.8, and I don't like doing 9.8, looking at CGC because those are graded and those are very subjective. I'm talking about just the raw books themselves. I mean, I guess we could look at cover price, I guess, because that might give us some kind of view, look in to see what has happened. But we really don't have anything that's as handy as GPA for raw books. And even GPA is half-assed because they only do eBay and certain auction houses. That's not even like taking the full market into consideration. But if we look at Thanos Quest and we look at number one, and then we go to the sales data, we'll see that here. Well, we can tell that this is an outlier right here. Make this a little bit bigger. This 109.99 in a raw 9.8 for $109 when nothing else. Oh, this one too, a 9.6. These are probably going to be graded books that were put here accidentally because you can see most of the time $31 for a 9.6. We've got some, I don't know, and this is the problem that I have with cover price. We can't click on anything to see where this data came from. They're not taking this and compiling any kind of a database that we can click on and say, this is the, this was from eBay on 12/20, 2020. This is the number of bids, or this is what the ASCII price was. Any of this stuff, these are just numbers on a screen. But I mean, we really can't use this as any kind of a guide. So it's too random. But here we have a few in the 9.0 to 9.4 range, in October to December, in a 2-month period, pretty much. We've got a 9.0 at 23, a 9.0 at 23 on the same day. That means somebody bought two of them potentially, and a 9.2 at $22. I mean, we could say that this really didn't have that much of an effect, but here this is an outlier apparently, because a 9.4 for $750 is less money than the 9.0 and the 9.2, and even going back a week or 2 weeks. A 9.0 is $21, a 9.2 is $29. So this has to be one of those auctions, eBay auctions, that just nobody saw. So I would consider that an outlier. But again, it's really hard to deal with most of that stuff. But getting back to the main focus, it's like we have this movie, which is not comic accurate whatsoever. They tried to shove their characters into this format and call it like follow the Infinity Gauntlet Crusade, but didn't work. It got great ratings and didn't affect the comic books. But meanwhile, you do have something like, no, I'm not doing Fantastic Four with Miles Teller, but here, the original Fantastic Four, this was a pretty damn good movie, and it was kind of comic accurate, kind of. At least they kept, you had some common aspects of everything. Obviously, Victor Von Doom didn't go to outer space with them. They didn't go to a space station, but they got their powers from a cosmic storm. That was comic accurate. The four people are still there. Johnny and Sue are brother and sister. There's a relationship was a little bit more advanced for Reed and Sue. They did know each other before they became, the astronauts, the space explorers, but they weren't in a relationship before that. But to me, this really wasn't that bad of a movie. And this got tanked. And, people are like, oh, well, a Fantastic Four movie, we're not going to watch another one until, somebody could show us that it's really, really good, because the first one sucked. And then if we look at the second one, we've got Rise of the Silver Surfer, and, that one, 51% and 37%. I don't see anybody say the Silver Surfer sucks as a character because he sucked in this movie. At least he got the same name. At least his name is still Norrin Rad. At least he still works as Galactus' herald. At least he still turns on Galactus after meeting, the Fantastic Four. Although this was after talking to Sue Storm instead of Alicia Masters, because in the original, in the comic books, Alicia Masters is the one who teaches the Silver Surfer about, the human condition and, caring for others and all that other stuff that brought him to turn against Galactus. But at least in this movie he did. And, so to me, this is more comic accurate than some other movies, yet it got these ratings, I guess because Jessica Alba is not that great of an actress. Thing actually was not that badly portrayed, at least, on screen. Christian McMahon, Julian McMahon. I didn't think he was a terrible Doctor Doom. But you know, I mean, we go back and we look at all those Batman movies. Those Batman movies were terrible. The Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, that hasn't done anything to you know, oh man, Batgirl valuations or any of the Rogues Gallery. Two-Face was just a clown. Bane was a clown. Poison Ivy was a clown. I mean, and these were supposed to be more real, more realistic, not the campy 1968. I thought it was Batman TV series. No, I don't know. I'm trying to find it. I'll go ahead here. Batman 1966. Okay. So, you know, this was meant to be campy and, you know, weird. And, you know, it was meant to have Frank Gorshin with the Joker. I can't make him any bigger. It's not going to work. Where you could literally see talk about a makeup scandal. I know that they talked about Henry Cavill as Superman with them, you know, digitally removing his facial hair. This is literally, I mean, you have Cesar Romero. I think I said Frank Gorshin before. Frank Gorshin was the Riddler. Cesar Romero, what year is this? 1966. You could, if you looked at this yourself and pull up a picture or find an actual picture, you will see that his mustache is all there. It just has the paint over it. They didn't even ask him to shave. They didn't do anything. They just painted. They put the face paint over his mustache, and you can see it. You know, you can see the mustache through here. So I can understand people comparing the two and be like, oh, well, Joker in 1966, it was hard to do because you didn't have the digital effects that you have now to, you know, fix Henry Cavill. But at the same time, nobody gave a shit. People saw this and they didn't care. He could have easily shaved. He could have easily have shaved, but he didn't, and they didn't ask him to. So, you know, all these things that go into our community reacting to these movies and taking it out on the comic books. It's like, where is this coming from and who the hell cares? You know, if a movie isn't comic accurate, fine. Blame the writer, blame the directors, write to Hollywood studio and tell them you don't want these people working on these things anymore. What? I honestly, it blows my mind. It honestly blows my mind how people could sit there and say, you know, the Eternals were terrible. We're going to sell off our stock of Eternals because the books suck. Those people are not the same as the ones in the book. The people, it's crazy to me. And I hate using that word crazy because it's, you know, has other connotations to it, but it just blows my mind how people could sit there and do all this stuff when, you know, this whole thing with Kang, you know, because Kang was defeated by Ant-Man in Quantumania. They said, oh my God, Kang is a terrible character. He was beaten by this little guy, this big, blah, blah, blah. How are you going to have him lose in his first appearance? And then Kang Comics, you know, just crashed. Same thing with the High Evolutionary. The High Evolutionary was a one and done, apparently. And Adam Warlock, you know, wasn't to everybody's liking. But people don't understand. Adam Warlock was still a child in that movie. He didn't have that progression to get to where he was, fully fleshed out. I mean, how are you going to take that one little condensed portion of an entire spectrum's worth of appearances that could there be and say Adam Warlock sucks now, dumping his books. Madam Web sucked. That movie sucked. Julia Carpenter, Jessica Drew, Madam Web, all of them, we're dumping them. They suck. I mean, it's kind of like going back to the whole thing where you're saying, okay, Shaq's record sucked. Hey, the movie that he was in sucked. Allen Iverson made a rap album, sucked. All these football, hockey, baseball players, they get caught cheating. They get arrested for drunk driving, beating wives, doing all this stuff. They don't affect their cards or their autograph values for the most part. But we take a movie adaptation and we allow that to destroy the value of a comic book, which they're kind of no relation in there. Now, I would understand if, let's say, Jim Lee was to come back to the X-Men and write a series, and he would use, basically he would take his characters, the way that he drew them and all that stuff, and do it. Or let's say he created Hush. He would go back and write a new series, but make it totally terrible. That I could understand if, if we said, oh, this character now sucks because in the same medium that we originally liked them in, they're now totally different and they suck. Let's say, I mean, it's kind of hard because we do have a lot of that stuff with the Elseworlds. I'm not a big fan of Elseworlds. That's why I don't really care for Batfleck. That whole Batfleck thing, I never liked that version of Batman. If I was to have a vote, it would probably be any kind of adaptation. I really liked the DC animated New 52 version of a lot of these characters. But, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this whole thing where people are just like, oh, this character in this movie sucked. But meanwhile, there's all these different universes in the comic books with different versions of the characters that we allow them to be. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just don't understand why people, I would say, get so invested and they can't make that separation. It's kind of like separating the actor from the character that they play. You get people that, let's say wrestling is one of the big things, where this comes in. Back in the day, wrestlers were always in character. They never broke character. Now, not so much. But, you would never see them as, breaking character. So people would think that Randy Savage was Randy Poffo. That's his real name, Randy Poffo. They cannot separate the two. They thought Hulk Hogan and Terry Bollea were the same person. But, one was a character, one was the real person. Obviously, in a lot of these people, the actual person was as big of a scumbag as the characters were. But, that's what I'm seeing with a lot of these comic book fans. They're taking the comic books and then they're taking the movies that are loosely based on the comic books. Because if you remember, all these things, whenever you see the movies, it always says based on characters created by, Joe Shuster, Bob Finger, Stan Lee, whoever you're looking at, they're based on them. They're not the same characters. And even though this is Marvel Studios making Marvel comic book movies, it's this director's vision of what this thing should be. It's the producer's vision of what it should be. It's the writer's vision. And also it's the constraints. Now, to me, if you don't have the characters to make Thanos Quest and Infinity Gauntlet the right way, make something else. You know, you have Thanos, you have Drax, you have Iron Man. You can go back to the early Iron Mans and you could have introduced them that way. Um, you know, although it's the it's a different version of Drax. Um, Walter something. Arthur Douglas. Yeah. This Drax is not the actual Drax the Destroyer who fought Thanos. You know, we could have created that separately. You know, I mean, there's just so many things that could have been done, but to me, I don't take it out on the comic books. You know, I'm not saying that the original Guardians of the Galaxy are any better or worse for what happened in the MCU. I don't even think that the second incarnation of the team should be any different, even though there are key differences between the two of them. I don't think you can take Adam Warlock from parts of one movie or who was another? Oh, Zachary Levi as Shazam, or yeah, Shazam, not Captain Marvel. I couldn't even make it through the second movie. I got through like 10 minutes of it. And I was like, yeah, I can't even do this movie. Something like that. It's like, you can't take that out on the person. Black Adam, The Rock, Mr. I'm The Rock in everything that I do, pretty much. Because everything I see him that's an action movie, he's always The Rock. You know, it sounds like him, it looks like him, he acts like him. You know, you can't take away from Black Adam. You can't take away from the JSA stuff because that movie sucked to most people. No, let's take a look. So going back to Rotten Tomatoes, we're going to Black Adam. 39% and then 88%. I don't know how this is an 88% with so many people said it sucked. Let's see what it says on IMDb. Black Adam. Sorry. Get this a little bigger. 6.2 out of 10. Okay. So 6.2 is 62%. This is 88%. So it's significantly lower on Black Adam on IMDb than it is from Rotten Tomatoes. And this rating is the popular rating, not on the critic rating. But yeah, as you can see, user reviews. I don't even see any of the other stuff. But yeah, as you can see, budget was 195 million. It grossed in US and Canada 168. Worldwide, it did 393. But even still, that's 390. It barely did double. It barely did double worldwide box office than the budget. And I think they say that it has to make like 4 or 5 times to be successful. I don't know. But this is the thing. To me, you look at Hawkman. Aldous Hodge is a good actor. Hawkman, the character that the gold, the metal, like to me, it wasn't there. Cyclone was cool. Atom Smasher was actually pretty comic accurate. Dr. Fate was awesome. Pierce Brosnan was awesome, but people didn't like the movie as a whole, I guess. I guess they didn't like The Rock, maybe. I don't know. But how can you take this one appearance that he's never appeared in anything else in, live action? He's appeared in Injustice, and he's appeared in Superman Shazam, Superman Shazam first something. It's another animated movie, and you know, the Return of Black Adam, Superman Shazam, the Return of Black Adam. You know, so you have other options that you could have looked at and said, hey, this character is still cool if we look at him here. But, you know, you're only looking at him in one movie. And, you know, how do you just tank an entire character's value off of that one thing? And it wasn't 100% terrible. It was just, you know, The Rock, you know, but that's, again, that's just me. That's just how I see things. I like to separate them. I'm going to do another video along these same lines, but why this character got tremendous hype from being in a, or spec being in a movie or a TV show, while these characters have, no one talks about them or you never see anything about them, even though they were also in TV shows that were actually better. Because if we look at certain things like Young Justice or the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, more so than the Justice League, but Justice League Unlimited, you saw a lot of characters there. Nobody ever gets any hype. But that's gonna be another video. But for now, I just want to know what your thoughts are. I want to know how you feel about taking the movie character here and then saying the source material should just get trashed because the movie was terrible. I don't care whose fault it was. Actor, writer, visual people, you know, like they said with She-Hulk, you know, they said She-Hulk, the CGI was bad, or they didn't like the Daredevil in the yellow. It looked like he was in, what they say, it looked like he was in an armor suit or something like that. I don't know, but I want to know how you take these things. Do you separate them, or do you sit there and say, you know what, this character is awesome regardless of what happened in the movie because I like them here in this book? I don't have any books here to, you know, to show you. Well, here I have Ghost Rider #2, just sitting behind me, waiting to press. What is Nicolas Cage's performance as Ghost Rider? You know, he was pretty sure he was the Johnny Blaze version. Does that mean that the 1970s books should have sucked? It should have tanked? You know, or okay. Black Lightning #2. How about the CW version of Black Lightning? I don't know if it got really good ratings or not. I really didn't care for it too much, but you know, if it was bad, should that mean that this series and this character is terrible because a version of this was not good? We're not saying that Black Lightning was not good. We're talking about the TV series, because we've got a perfect example. We've got Flash in the Arrowverse, Mark Guggenheim stuff, who was Grant Gustin, who to me was really, really good. Then you have Ezra Miller, who I can't stand. Not talking about the person, not talking about anything else other than the way that he comes off portraying Barry Allen. I can't stand him. How do you know, what do you say? One was good, one was bad, so we meet in the middle and we don't change anything about the Barry Allen character? You know, I want to know how you view all this stuff, because I need to know. I need to know what other people think, because I just can't see what's going on. You know, just let's talk about it. And I'll see you in the next video.